Welcome back, coin collectors and treasure hunters. Today, we're taking a closer look at some fascinating United States wheat pennies that could be worth much more than their original 1-cent value. If you have old wheat pennies sitting in a jar, collection, drawer, or inherited coin box, now is the perfect time to check them carefully. In this video, we'll explore what makes certain Lincoln Wheat Pennies valuable in today's 2026 collector market. We look at important dates, mint marks, rare varieties, possible mint errors, condition, and other details that can dramatically affect a coin's value. While most wheat pennies are common and worth only a small amount above face value, certain rare examples can command hundreds, thousands, or even much more when rarity and condition come together. So don't assume that every old penny is automatically valuable, and don't assume that every valuable penny looks perfect. The key is knowing exactly what to look for. Stay with us until the end, because one small detail on a wheat penny can sometimes make a huge difference in its collector value. Let's begin the hunt and see if you might have one of these interesting old US coins. Let's get started. First up, the 1945 Lincoln Wheat Penny, a United States 1-cent coin with no mint mark. If you have an old wheat penny sitting in a collection, a jar, an inherited coin box, or even an old group of coins, you may have wondered whether it could be worth more than 1 cent. The 1945 Lincoln cent is especially interesting because it was produced during the final year of World War II, making it part of an important period in American history. In this video, we will examine its history, design, composition, identifying characteristics, condition, possible varieties and errors, and what collectors may realistically pay for examples in different grades. We will also discuss why some Lincoln Wheat Pennies can reach hundreds or even thousands of dollars, while ordinary circulated examples remain relatively affordable. The 1945 Lincoln Wheat Penny was produced during a remarkable moment in American history. The United States was still deeply involved in World War II, and the economy was operating under extraordinary wartime conditions. The Lincoln cent had already been circulating for decades, having first been introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. By 1945, the familiar Lincoln portrait on the obverse and wheatear design on the reverse had become one of the most recognizable coin designs in the country. Millions of Americans used these pennies every day to purchase goods, pay for services, and make change. Because the coin was produced during the final year of the war, the 1945 issue provides collectors with a small but tangible connection to that historic era. One of the first things collectors should understand about the 1945 wheat penny is the meaning of the missing mint mark. A 1945 Lincoln cent without a mint mark was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Philadelphia traditionally did not place a mint mark on its cents during this period. Therefore, the absence of a mint mark does not automatically mean that the coin is rare or an error. On a 1945 wheat penny, you should normally expect to see no mint letter beneath the date because that is how Philadelphia issues were identified. This is an important point for beginners because some people see a blank area below the date and immediately assume that the coin is missing something. In reality, for this particular issue, no mint mark is completely normal. Let's start with the front of the coin, known as the obverse. It features the famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing right. Above his head appears the inscription Liberty, while the phrase "In God We Trust" is positioned along the upper edge of the design. The date 1945 appears in front of Lincoln's portrait. When examining an old coin, collectors should pay close attention to the date because worn or damaged numbers can sometimes be difficult to identify. On a genuine 1945 Lincoln cent, the digits should have the correct style and placement associated with the wheat penny design. Collectors should also inspect the fields around the date and Lincoln's portrait for unusual doubling, cracks, dye damage, or other characteristics that could potentially increase collector interest. The reverse of the 1945 Lincoln cent is instantly recognizable because it displays two wheat ears surrounding the inscriptions 1 cent and United States of America, along with the phrase EPLURBUSUNUM. This reverse design is the reason collectors commonly call these coins wheat pennies. The wheat reverse was used from 1909 through 1958, making it one of the longest-running and most beloved designs in American coinage. On a well-preserved 1945 example, the wheat stalks can remain surprisingly detailed. However, circulation gradually removes the fine lines and texture from the wheat ears. Collectors therefore examine the reverse carefully when determining how much detail remains and how the coin should be graded. The 1945 Lincoln cent is also interesting because it belongs to the traditional bronze era of Lincoln cents. During World War II, the United States Mint made important changes to some coin compositions because strategic metals such as copper were needed for the war effort. The famous 1943 Lincoln cent, for example, was made primarily from zinc-coated steel. By 1944, the mint had returned to a copper-based composition, using metal recovered from spent ammunition shell casings along with other copper sources. The 1945 Lincoln cent, therefore, belongs to this fascinating wartime period of American coin production. This historical connection adds considerable collecting interest even when the coin itself is not particularly rare. Now we come to the question everyone wants answered: what makes a 1945 wheat penny valuable? The biggest factors are condition, strike quality, rarity, varieties, eras, originality, and certification. A normal circulated 1945 Philadelphia cent is a common date compared with some of the famous K-date Lincoln Wheat Pennies. If your example is heavily worn, scratched, stained, or damaged, its value may be relatively modest. But if you discover a sharply struck specimen with excellent surfaces, strong original color, and very little wear, collector interest can increase significantly. Coins certified by professional grading services can also command premiums when they receive high grades. The important lesson is that the date alone does not make every 1945 penny a high-dollar treasure. The coin described in today's video is in good condition, which generally means that it has experienced substantial circulation and shows significant wear. On a heavily circulated Lincoln wheat penny, Lincoln's portrait may have lost much of its original detail, and the wheat stalks on the reverse can appear flattened. Letters and numbers may also show noticeable wear. For a collector, however, even a well-worn 1945 penny can be enjoyable because it has survived more than 8 decades. Remember that condition terminology used by collectors can be more specific than everyday descriptions such as good, old, or rough. Professional grading considers the amount of wear, surface condition, strike, color, and other characteristics. Therefore, an exact value cannot be determined simply from the year and mint mark status. As we look at the 2026 market, it is important to separate realistic prices from sensational claims found online. A regular 1945 Lincoln wheat cent with no mint mark and ordinary circulated, where is generally worth only a small amount above its 1 cent face value, depending on condition, color, demand, and the buyer or seller involved. A good condition example is not normally a hundreds or thousands of dollars coin. Collectors can often find circulated 1945 cents relatively easily. However, this does not mean you should throw the coin away. Wheat pennies remain popular with collectors, and attractive examples can have additional value. The real excitement begins when a supposedly ordinary 1945 penny turns out to have an unusual variety, a major minting error, exceptional preservation, or another characteristic that separates it from millions of normal example condition can make a dramatic difference in coin collecting. Imagine 2 1945 wheat pennies. One has spent decades circulating through pockets, cash registers, and coin jars, while the other has remained carefully preserved with sharp details and minimal contact marks. Even though both coins were struck in the same year at the same mint, collectors may value them very differently. High-grade coins can become much more interesting when they retain strong original surfaces and attractive red coloration. Professional certification can also make it easier for buyers to compare coins because the grade has been evaluated by an independent grading company. Exceptional specimens can bring substantial premiums, but it is important not to assume that every shiny 1945 penny is automatically valuable. Cleaning can actually reduce collector appeal because it may damage the original surfaces. Another area worth investigating is errors and varieties. A normal 1945 Philadelphia cent is not considered a major rarity simply because it lacks a mint mark. However, genuine minting errors can be collectible. Examples of errors that collectors may investigate include dramatic doubled designs, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, broad strikes, and other manufacturing abnormalities. The key word is genuine. Many coins that appear unusual are actually showing normal wear, damage that happened after leaving the mint, or ordinary die characteristics that do not carry a major premium. If you believe your 1945 wheat penny has a significant error, it is wise to compare it with reliable references. And for a potentially valuable coin, consider professional authentication. Collectors also pay close attention to the color and surfaces of copper-based Lincoln cents. You may encounter descriptions such as brown, and red when researching graded copper coins. A coin with attractive original red coloration and strong preservation can be much more desirable than a heavily worn brown example. But color alone does not guarantee a huge value. The coin still needs to have excellent overall preservation and characteristics that collectors actually want. Be very careful if someone recommends polishing or cleaning your 1945 wheat penny to make it look brighter. Cleaning can leave scratches, unnatural surfaces, or other evidence of alteration. For collectible coins, originality is usually much more important than artificial shine. If you have a 1945 wheat penny, begin by examining the date carefully. Confirm that the coin really reads 1945 and that the design matches the Lincoln wheat cent. Next, check the area beneath the date. On the Philadelphia issue, there should normally be no mint mark. Then inspect both sides under good lighting. Look for strong wheatstalk detail, unusual doubling, die cracks, off-center striking, clipped edges, or other characteristics. Also check for cleaning, scratches, corrosion, environmental damage, and discoloration. Do not scrape the surface or use harsh chemicals. If your coin appears unusually well preserved or displays a potentially major mint error, taking clear photographs and obtaining an expert opinion can be a much better approach than relying on an exaggerated online valuation. So, could a 1945 no-mint mark wheat penny ever be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars? Potentially, but not simply because it is a 1945 penny. Extremely high values generally require something exceptional, such as a very high certified grade, a significant and authenticated error, or another recognized rarity. A normal good condition Philadelphia 1945 cent should not be advertised as a guaranteed $1,000 coin. This distinction is extremely important for collectors because online videos and listings sometimes show extraordinary auction results and make them sound typical. They are not. If you see a claim that every 1945 wheat penny is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, be skeptical. The specific coin, its grade, its authenticity, and its recognized variety all matter. The 1945 Lincoln Wheat Penny may not be a jackpot coin in ordinary circulated condition, but it remains a fascinating piece of American history. It was struck during the final year of World War II and carries the classic Lincoln portrait and wheat reverse that millions of Americans knew throughout the first half of the 20th century. Its lack of a mint mark tells us that it was produced at the Philadelphia Mint, not that it is automatically an error. In today's 2026 market, ordinary circulated examples generally remain affordable, while exceptional high-grade pieces and authenticated major errors can attract much stronger collector interest. So before you spend or discard an old 1945 wheat penny, take a moment to inspect it carefully. Check the date, surfaces, wheat details, color, and possible errors. You never know what might be hiding in an old collection, but always remember that accurate grading and authentication are essential before believing a big money valuation. If you enjoyed this coin history and value guide, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and keep checking your change, because the next interesting coin could already be sitting in your collection. Next up, the 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny, specifically the Philadelphia issue with no mint mark. If you have an old wheat penny sitting in a jar, collection, drawer, or box of inherited coins, you may be wondering whether it is simply an old 1-cent coin or something more interesting. The 1946 Lincoln Wheat Cent is especially fascinating because it belongs to the important period immediately following World War II. This tiny copper coin has survived for roughly 80 years, passing through countless hands and experiencing decades of American history. But before assuming that every 1946 penny is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, it is important to understand what actually determines its value. The date, mint mark, condition, color, strike, surface quality, and possible errors or varieties all matter. In today's video, we will explore the history and background of the 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny, explain why the Philadelphia version has no mint mark, examine its design and unique characteristics, discuss what collectors look for, and talk about realistic 2026 market values, from rough circulated examples to premium high-grade specimens. The story of the 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny begins during a major turning point in United States history. World War II had ended in 1945, and America was entering a new post-war era. During the war years, the United States Mint had made important changes to coin production because copper was needed for military and industrial purposes. The famous 1943 steel cent is one of the best-known examples of those wartime changes. By 1944, copper returned to the cent, and by 1946 the United States was firmly moving into the post-war period. The 1946 Lincoln cent therefore represents more than just 1 cent of spending power. It represents the return to normal production after one of the most important conflicts in American history. Millions of these pennies entered circulation, meaning that examples could be found in everyday commerce for decades. People used them to buy small items, make change, and fill cash registers. Over time, many became heavily worn, scratched, darkened, or damaged. That is one reason why finding a well-preserved 1946 penny today can be much more exciting than simply finding an old coin. One of the first things collectors should understand about this particular coin is the absence of a mint mark. A 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny with no mint mark was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Unlike coins produced at Denver or San Francisco, Philadelphia cents traditionally did not receive a mint letter during this era. Therefore, the lack of a mint mark does not automatically mean the coin is a rare error. In fact, millions of 1946 cents were produced without a mint mark. This is extremely important when evaluating your coin, because many people see an old penny without a mint letter and immediately assume it is rare. The correct approach is to identify the date first, determine whether a mint mark is present or absent, examine the condition, and then search for unusual characteristics. A 1946 Philadelphia cent can certainly be collectible, but its value comes from the combination of age, condition, preservation, rarity of the individual specimen, and collector demand, not simply because there is no mint mark. The front or obverse of the 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny features the famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. Lincoln faces to the right, with the inscriptions Liberty and In God We Trust appearing around the portrait. The date 1946 is located on the lower right portion of the obverse. This design had been introduced decades earlier, in 1909, making the Lincoln cent one of the most recognizable coins in American history. When examining a 1946 penny, collectors should carefully inspect the date because heavily worn examples can sometimes have weak or partially damaged digits. Look closely at the lettering as well. The condition of Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, coat, and the surrounding lettering can tell you a great deal about how much circulation the coin experienced. On a rough example, these details may be smooth and difficult to distinguish. On a higher grade example, much more original detail remains visible. The reverse of the 1946 Lincoln cent is equally important. Instead of the Lincoln Memorial that appeared on later Lincoln cents, the 1946 penny carries the classic wheat ears reverse. Two wheat stalks surround the words 1 cent and United States of America, with EPLURBUSUNUM above them. This reverse is one of the main reasons collectors love Lincoln Wheat Pennies. The wheat design was used from 1909 through 1958, creating a long-running series with numerous dates, mint marks, varieties, and famous rarities. On a rough 1946 penny, the wheat ears may be worn almost completely smooth. On a better preserved coin, the individual lines and details of the wheat stalks can remain visible. When examining your coin, pay attention to both wheat ears, the lettering, and the central areas of the reverse. Strong detail and clean surfaces can make a substantial difference in collector appeal. The 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny was produced from a copper-based composition typical of the post-war wheat cent era. When newly struck, these pennies had a bright reddish copper appearance. However, copper naturally changes color as it is exposed to oxygen, moisture, chemicals, handling, and the environment. This is why an old penny may appear brown, reddish-brown, dark brown, or somewhere between these colors. Collectors often pay close attention to the coin's original color, because an attractive original red specimen can be considerably more desirable than a heavily toned or damaged example of the same date. This becomes especially important in higher grades. A rough 1946 penny may have scratches, dark spots, corrosion, stains, and heavy wear, while a carefully preserved specimen can retain much more of its original appearance. Never assume that cleaning a dark penny will increase its value. In many cases, cleaning can permanently damage the surfaces and reduce collector interest. Now let's talk specifically about the rough condition 1946 wheat penny. If your coin has heavy circulation wear, scratches, dents, discoloration, corrosion, or significant surface damage, it will normally fall toward the lower end of the market. On a heavily worn example, Lincoln's portrait may have lost much of its original detail, the wheat stalks may be weak, and some lettering may show substantial wear. A coin in this condition can still be historically interesting, but collectors generally do not pay enormous premiums for ordinary damaged examples. This is where realistic expectations become very important. An old date alone does not automatically turn a penny into a $1,000 coin. A normal circulated 1946 Philadelphia wheat cent can often be worth only a modest amount above face value, depending on condition and current collector demand. Nevertheless, if your rough coin contains an unusual minting error, an important variety, or another exceptional characteristic, the situation can be very different. Condition is one of the most important factors in determining the value of a 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny. Coin collectors and grading companies use standardized grades to describe how much wear and damage a coin has experienced. A heavily circulated example might grade somewhere in the lower circulated range, while a coin that shows no obvious circulation wear could qualify for a mint state grade. The difference in value between an ordinary circulated coin and an exceptional mint state example can be significant. Collectors examine the amount of wear on Lincoln's hair and cheek, the sharpness of the lettering, the wheat details on the reverse, the presence of contact marks, scratches, discoloration, and the overall quality of the surfaces. High-grade coins are much scarcer than ordinary circulated pieces because most 1946 pennies spent years being used as money. That is why preservation can be one of the biggest factors separating an inexpensive old penny from a premium collectible. If you happen to discover a 1946 no-mint mark wheat penny that appears unusually bright, sharply detailed, and free from circulation wear, you should examine it carefully. In the collector market, mint state coins can be divided into different numerical grades, and copper cents can also receive color designations such as brown, or red, depending on the amount of original red color remaining. A high-grade red 1946 Lincoln cent can be considerably more desirable than a heavily circulated brown example. However, appearance alone is not enough to establish a professional grade. Lighting can make a coin look better than it really is, and a coin that has been cleaned or chemically treated may appear unnaturally bright. Serious collectors often rely on professional third-party grading when a coin appears valuable enough to justify the expense. Certification can help establish authenticity, grade, and marketability, although grading fees and other costs should be considered before submitting a common coin. Another reason a 1946 wheat penny can become more interesting is the possibility of a genuine minting error or unusual variety. Errors occur during the manufacturing process and can include characteristics such as dramatic doubling, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die-related problems, or other abnormalities. But collectors need to be careful because many supposed errors are actually damage that happened after the coin left the mint. Scratches, dents, machine damage, environmental corrosion, and altered surfaces are not automatically valuable mint errors. If you believe your 1946 penny has an unusual feature, compare it with authenticated examples and consider professional evaluation. A genuine major mint error can dramatically change collector interest, but minor imperfections generally do not create a fortune. The key is to distinguish a true mint-made characteristic from damage acquired during nearly 80 years of circulation. The answer depends heavily on condition. A rough, heavily circulated example may be worth only a small premium over its 1-cent face value, sometimes around the range collectors commonly pay for ordinary circulated wheat cents. Better circulated examples can bring more, while attractive uncirculated coins can command substantially higher prices. Premium certified specimens at very high grades can reach into the hundreds of dollars, depending on grade, color, eye appeal, and demand. Exceptional auction quality examples can potentially bring even more, but this is the important point. A normal rough 1946 no-mint mark penny should not automatically be described as a $1,000 or $10,000 coin. Values change with the market, and asking prices are not the same as actual completed sales. Always compare your coin with recent sold examples rather than relying on sensational online listings. This is where many coin videos become misleading, so let's be very clear. A rough 1946 Philadelphia wheat penny by itself is generally not a thousands of dollars rarity. If someone claims that every 1946 no-mint mark penny is worth thousands simply because it is old, that claim should be treated with caution. The higher values associated with Lincoln cents generally involve extraordinary condition, major errors, recognized varieties, or exceptional certified examples. A coin that has spent decades in circulation and now has heavy scratches, corrosion, and wear is unlikely to command the same price as a nearly pristine coin preserved since 1946. That does not mean your rough penny is worthless. It still represents American history, and wheat penny collectors may gladly add ordinary circulated examples to their collections. The real excitement comes from searching through many coins and discovering the unusual specimen that stands apart from the rest. If you have a 1946 wheat penny, begin your inspection carefully. First, confirm the date is actually 1946. Next, look beneath the date area and confirm whether there is a mint mark. For a Philadelphia issue, there should be no mint mark. Examine both sides under good lighting, preferably using a magnifying glass rather than handling the coin excessively. Look at Lincoln's hair, cheek, jaw, and the lettering. Then turn the coin over and inspect the wheat ears, the words 1 cent, United States of America, and EPLUIBUSUNUM. Search for unusual doubling, major striking abnormalities, or other characteristics that appear to have been created during minting rather than afterward. Also inspect the edge for unusual damage or irregularities. If the coin appears valuable, avoid cleaning it, polishing it, scratching it, or applying chemicals. A potentially valuable coin should be preserved in its existing condition, even when a 1946 wheat penny is not a rare jackpot coin. It remains an important collectible. Think about what this little piece of copper witnessed. It was struck during the first year after World War II had ended, when the United States was beginning a new chapter. It may have circulated through American stores, banks, homes, and businesses during a period of enormous social and economic change. Nearly 8 decades later, it can still be held in your hand. That historical connection is part of the appeal of coin collecting. Collectors are not interested only in price tags. They also appreciate design, history, preservation, rarity, and the stories behind old coins. The 1946 wheat penny combines all of these qualities. And because wheat cents can still occasionally appear in old collections, inherited coin jars, estate lots, and forgotten boxes, the search remains exciting. So, before you spend or dismiss that old 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny with no mint mark, take a closer look. Remember that the absence of a mint mark identifies it as a Philadelphia issue and does not by itself make the coin rare. A rough circulated example will generally have a modest value, while high-grade, attractive, certified specimens can be worth substantially more. Genuine mint errors or exceptional varieties can change the equation completely. The most important factors are condition, color, surface quality, strike, authenticity, and whether the coin has a recognized collectible variety or error. If you find one, don't clean it and don't assume an enormous value from an internet asking price. Compare it with actual market sales, and if it appears exceptional, consider getting professional advice. The 1946 wheat penny may be small, but it carries a remarkable piece of American history. So check your old coins, search your wheat pennies carefully, and remember, the real treasure may not be the age of the coin alone. It may be the unusual detail that separates an ordinary penny from a truly collectible one. Next up, the 1947 Lincoln Wheat Cent with no mint mark. This small 1-cent coin may look ordinary at first, especially when it has been circulated for decades and shows scratches, discoloration, dirt, or heavy wear, but it represents an important period in United States history. The Lincoln Wheat Cent was introduced in 1909 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, and it became one of the most recognizable coins ever produced by the United States Mint. By 1947, the wheat cent had already been circulating for nearly 4 decades. The country had recently come through World War II, and millions of Americans were using coins like this every day for purchases, transportation, newspapers, food, and other necessities. Because of this long history, the 1947 penny can be fascinating to collectors, even when it is not an extremely rare date. The year 1947 is especially interesting, because it came immediately after the end of World War II. During the war years, the United States Mint made major changes to coin production, because copper and other metals were needed for military purposes. Lincoln cents dated 1943 were famously produced in zinc-coated steel rather than the traditional bronze composition. After the war, the mint returned to the familiar bronze composition for Lincoln cents. The 1947 cent, therefore, belongs to an important post-war period when American coinage was returning to more traditional production. Holding a 1947 wheat cent today gives collectors a tangible connection to that period of American history. The coin passed through countless hands during a time when the United States was rebuilding, industries were changing, soldiers were returning home, and the economy was entering the post-war era. One of the most important things to understand about this coin is the absence of a mint mark. A 1947 Lincoln cent without a mint mark was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. Collectors sometimes see a missing mint mark and immediately assume that the coin must be an error, but that is not the case for this issue. Philadelphia cents traditionally carried no mint mark during this period. Coins produced at Denver generally carried a small d, while San Francisco coins carried an s. Therefore, if you have a genuine 1947 Lincoln Wheat cent, and there is no letter beneath the date, that normally indicates Philadelphia production. This distinction is extremely important when identifying the coin, because the date and mint mark together determine the exact variety, and can influence its desirability and value. The front, or obverse, of the 1947 Lincoln Wheat Cent features the famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. Lincoln faces toward the right, with the inscriptions "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date appearing around the portrait. The design had already become extremely familiar to Americans by 1947. When examining an old example, collectors should carefully inspect Lincoln's portrait and the surrounding lettering. On heavily circulated coins, some of the details may have become weak or partially worn away. The condition of the lettering, Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline and coat can help determine the grade. Collectors should also check the date carefully because old coins can sometimes have damage, corrosion, or staining that makes individual digits difficult to read. The reverse of the 1947 Lincoln Wheat Cent is perhaps the most recognizable feature of the entire series. It displays two wheat ears along the left and right sides, with the words 1 cent and United States of America in the center. Above the denomination is the motto EPLURBUSUNUM. The wheat ears gave these coins their famous nickname, wheat pennies or wheat cents. When examining an old 1947 example, pay close attention to the wheat lines. On a heavily worn specimen, many of the individual lines can disappear. On a higher grade coin, much sharper detail can remain. The reverse can also reveal problems such as scratches, corrosion, cleaning marks, rim damage, stains, or other forms of environmental damage that may reduce collector appeal. The 1947 Lincoln Wheat Cent was struck in the traditional bronze composition used for Lincoln cents after the wartime steel cent period. Freshly produced examples originally had a bright copper appearance, but decades of circulation and exposure to air, moisture, chemicals, soil, and other environmental conditions can dramatically change their appearance. Today, a 1947 penny might appear brown, reddish-brown, dark, dull, or even unusually bright if it has been improperly cleaned. Collectors often pay close attention to original color and surface quality. A naturally preserved coin with attractive original surfaces can be much more desirable than a coin that has been aggressively polished. This is why you should generally avoid cleaning an old collectible coin simply because it looks dirty. Cleaning can permanently damage the surfaces and may reduce its numismatic value. This is where the subject becomes particularly interesting. A regular 1947 Philadelphia wheat cent is not automatically worth hundreds or thousands of dollars simply because it is old. Millions of Lincoln cents from this era were produced, and many examples have survived. However, value can increase significantly when a coin has exceptional condition, attractive original surfaces, an important error or variety, or strong certification from a respected grading service. A heavily worn example found in an old collection may have only modest collector value, while an exceptionally preserved specimen can command substantially more. This is an important lesson for anyone searching through old pennies. Age alone does not determine value. Collectors consider rarity, condition, demand, originality, eye appeal, and documented auction results. Condition is one of the biggest factors affecting the value of a 1947 wheat cent. A coin in very worn condition may have a smooth appearance, with Lincoln's hair and the wheat details heavily reduced. A coin in fine condition should retain more recognizable design detail, while very fine and extremely fine examples will show progressively stronger details. Coins in about uncirculated condition may show only limited circulation wear, while mint state examples have no actual circulation wear and can preserve much of the original detail. Professional grading becomes particularly important for high-value examples because small differences in grade can create significant differences in market value. A coin that appears beautiful to the naked eye may still have cleaning, scratches, carbon spots, or other issues that affect its grade. Collectors of Lincoln cents also pay attention to the color of copper coins. Certified Lincoln cents may receive color designations such as brown, red-brown, or red, depending on how much original red coloration remains. A circulated 1947 cent will commonly show brown coloration, because decades of handling and environmental exposure naturally change the copper surface. High-grade examples retaining attractive original reddish coloration can be more desirable. However, collectors should be careful when evaluating color because artificially brightened or cleaned copper can sometimes appear suspicious. Originality matters. A naturally preserved coin with attractive surfaces is generally more interesting to serious collectors than one that has been chemically treated or polished to look newer than it really is. Another area worth checking is the possibility of an unusual minting error or variety. Not every unusual-looking coin is a valuable error, but genuine mint errors can attract strong collector interest. When examining a 1947 wheat cent, look carefully at the date, lettering, rim, devices, and overall strike. Things such as major doubling, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, unusual die characteristics, or other genuine minting abnormalities can potentially make a coin more interesting. However, damage that happened after the coin left the mint, such as scratches, dents, flattening, corrosion, or damage from machinery, is not the same thing as a valuable mint error. Before assuming that an unusual 1947 penny is worth thousands of dollars, collectors should have the suspected variety or error properly attributed. If your 1947 no-mint mark wheat cent is described as being in old, rough, dirty, or heavily circulated condition, it is important to keep expectations realistic. Such a coin can absolutely be collectible and historically interesting, but it does not automatically have a value in the hundreds or thousands of dollars. Heavy wear, corrosion, scratches, environmental damage, and cleaning can substantially reduce a coin's market appeal. Nevertheless, an old circulated wheat cent can still be worth examining because you may discover an unusual variety or other characteristic. The best approach is to preserve the coin exactly as you found it, avoid harsh cleaning, and inspect it under good lighting. Even when the monetary value is modest, the historical value and enjoyment of owning a nearly 80-year-old American coin can be significant. When discussing the 2026 market value of a 1947 Philadelphia wheat cent, it is important not to give one exaggerated price and claim that every example is worth that amount. The actual value depends heavily on condition and certification. Common circulated examples generally trade for relatively modest amounts, while better preserved examples can bring higher prices. Exceptional certified mint state coins, particularly pieces with desirable color and strong eye appeal, can move into the hundreds or potentially much higher depending on grade and market demand. Truly exceptional specimens or coins with significant and authenticated errors can potentially reach four-figure levels or more. However, claims that an ordinary rough 1947 no-mint mark penny is automatically worth thousands or millions should be treated with caution. Real value should be supported by comparable sales and professional authentication. If you have a 1947 wheat cent, start by identifying the date and checking whether there is a mint mark below the date. If there is no mint mark, it is normally a Philadelphia issue. Next, examine the coin under magnification. Look at Lincoln's hair, cheek, jaw, coat, lettering, and date on the obverse. Then turn it over and inspect the wheat ears, central lettering, motto, rim, and overall strike. Look for unusual doubling or other characteristics, but do not confuse damage with a mint error. Also check whether the coin has been cleaned. A bright, shiny appearance on an old copper coin is not necessarily a positive sign. Finally, compare your coin with reliable grading references or consider professional authentication if you believe you have an unusually high-grade or potentially rare specimen. The popularity of the 1947 wheat cent goes far beyond its potential price. It is part of one of America's most famous coin series and connects collectors with an important chapter of 20th century history. The coin was produced only a few years after the end of World War II, when the United States was experiencing enormous social and economic changes. Millions of these cents were used in everyday transactions, meaning that each surviving coin may have spent decades traveling through pockets, cash registers, banks, shops, and homes. Today, collectors appreciate these coins because they are affordable pieces of American history. Even an ordinary circulated example can tell a story about the era in which it was made and the generations of people who handled it. So could a 1947 Lincoln wheat cent with no mint mark be valuable? The answer is yes, but the exact value depends on what you actually have. A normal worn example is generally not a jackpot coin simply because it is nearly 80 years old. But a sharply struck, beautifully preserved, high-grade example, or a coin with a genuine and significant mint error or variety, can be considerably more desirable. The key is to look beyond the date. Check the mint mark position, examine the condition, study the surfaces, inspect the design details, and never clean the coin. Most importantly, remember that online claims of enormous values should always be verified against genuine market evidence. If you have a 1947 wheat cent sitting in an old collection, coin jar, drawer, or inherited group of pennies, take a closer look before spending it. You might not have a fortune, but you could have a fascinating piece of American history that deserves a second look. And that is exactly why searching old wheat pennies can be so exciting. Next up, the 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny, a United States 1-cent coin struck at the Denver Mint, and identified by the small D mint mark beneath the date. At first glance, this old wheat penny may look like an ordinary 1-cent coin from the early 1950s, especially if you find one in circulated or fine condition. But coins from this era have an important place in American numismatic history, and collectors pay close attention to their date, mint mark, condition, color, strike quality, and unusual varieties or errors. The 1951 D is not automatically a $1,000 coin simply because it is old, so it is important to understand the difference between an ordinary circulated example and a genuinely exceptional specimen. In today's video, we will explore the history and background of the 1951 D wheat penny, examine its design and unique characteristics, discuss what the D mint mark means, explain what fine condition looks like, and then look at how its value can change dramatically depending on grade, preservation, rarity, and certification. The Lincoln Wheat Cent was one of the most recognizable American coins of the 20th century. The series began in 1909 and continued until 1958, making the 1951 D part of the final decade of the classic wheat penny era. The coin was designed by Victor David Brenner, whose portrait of Abraham Lincoln appears on the obverse. The reverse features two wheat ears surrounding the inscriptions 1 cent and United States of America, with the motto EPLUOBUSUNUM above. This design connected the nation's first widely circulated Lincoln cent with themes of agriculture, national identity, and American history. By 1951, the wheat cent had already been in circulation for more than 4 decades, meaning Americans had used essentially the same iconic design through enormous historical changes, including 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and the beginning of the post-war era. That historical continuity is one reason collectors continue to find these coins fascinating. The most important identifying feature of the coin discussed in this video is the D mint mark. On a 1951 D Lincoln Wheat Penny, the letter D appears below the date on the obverse, indicating that the coin was struck at the Denver Mint. Mint marks are extremely important to collectors because different United States mint facilities produce different quantities of the same coin, and production levels can influence scarcity. The 1951 D is not considered one of the legendary key-date wheat cents, but that does not mean every example has the same value. A heavily circulated example can be relatively affordable, while a sharply struck, attractive high-grade specimen can command substantially more. Collectors therefore need to look beyond the date alone. The combination of date, mint mark, grade, surface quality, color, strike, and possible errors or varieties determines where an individual coin belongs in the market. The 1951 D wheat penny belongs to the classic bronze Lincoln cent era. These cents were made primarily from copper, with a small amount of tin and zinc in the traditional bronze composition used for Lincoln cents of the period. The coin has a face value of 1 cent, but its collectible value can be much higher when its condition and characteristics attract collectors. The obverse displays Lincoln facing right, with the inscriptions Liberty and In God We Trust surrounding the portrait. The date 1951 appears on the lower right portion of the obverse, with the D mint mark beneath it. On the reverse, the familiar wheat stalks frame the central lettering. When examining a 1951 D, collectors should inspect both sides carefully rather than focusing only on the date. Details around Lincoln's hair, cheek, jaw, coat, wheat ears, lettering, and rim can provide important clues about condition and strike quality. The user description for today's coin specifies fine condition, and understanding that grade is extremely important. A fine Lincoln wheat penny has experienced noticeable circulation, but it still retains a meaningful amount of its original design detail. On a fine 1951 D, Lincoln's portrait should remain clearly recognizable, although the highest points of the hair, cheek, and coat will show considerable wear. The reverse wheat ears and lettering should also remain visible, but the finer details of the wheat stalks will have been softened through circulation. Fine is therefore very different from an uncirculated coin. A coin in fine condition has been used in commerce and shows wear, but it should not be completely smooth or severely damaged. Scratches, cleaning, corrosion, stains, bends, holes, or other problems can reduce its desirability even when the coin technically appears to have moderate remaining detail. One of the most important lessons for anyone searching for old wheat pennies is that age alone does not determine value. Millions of Lincoln wheat cents survived, and many dates can still be found in circulated condition. The difference between a common circulated example and a highly desirable collector coin can be dramatic. For the 1951 D, fine examples generally belong in a much lower price category than exceptional mint state specimens. Collectors examine the amount of wear, original surface quality, color, strike, marks, and overall eye appeal. A brown, heavily worn coin with scratches may attract less interest than a sharply struck example with attractive original surfaces. If the coin has been cleaned, polished, damaged, or altered, its marketability may decrease considerably. That is why anyone claiming that every 1951D wheat penny is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars should be approached with caution. There are several features you should inspect when you find a 1951D wheat penny. First, verify the 1951 date and make sure the small D mint mark is actually present beneath the date. Next, examine the coin under good lighting for unusual doubling, repunched elements, die cracks, die clashes, off-center striking, or other legitimate mint errors. Be careful, however, because ordinary wear and damage can sometimes look like an error to an inexperienced collector. Also, examine the rims. A strong, complete rim can be a positive feature, while major dents or flattening can hurt the coin's appeal. On the reverse, inspect the wheat ears and lettering for unusual characteristics. Finally, look at the overall surface. Original copper color, attractive toning, and clean surfaces can make a major difference, especially in higher grades. Original surfaces are especially important when evaluating an old copper coin. Many people find a wheat penny and believe that making it shiny will increase its value, so they polish or chemically clean it. Unfortunately, cleaning can permanently alter the natural surface of the coin and may make it less desirable to collectors. A naturally aged brown Lincoln cent can be much more appealing to a knowledgeable collector than a bright coin that has been aggressively polished. If your 1951D has dirt or ordinary age-related toning, it is generally better to avoid household cleaning methods. Instead, handle it carefully by the edges and keep it in a suitable coin holder. The goal is preservation, not making an old coin look new. Collectors value originality, and an untouched coin can tell a much better story about its journey through American history. There is a major difference between a fine 1951D and a high-grade uncirculated example. A fine coin has obvious circulation wear and is generally worth considerably less than a superb mint-state coin. An uncirculated specimen, by contrast, should show little or no actual circulation, wear, and may preserve much of the original detail and surface quality from the time it left the mint. The higher the grade, the more demanding collectors become. At the top end of the grading scale, even tiny marks, weak strikes, discoloration, or surface imperfections can influence the final grade. This explains why two coins with exactly the same date and mint mark can have dramatically different market values. When you see a headline claiming that a 1951D penny is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, always ask, what grade is the coin? Is it certified? Is it an error or variety? And was that amount actually realized in a documented sale as of 2026? An ordinary 1951D Lincoln Wheat Penny in circulated fine condition is generally not a coin that should automatically be valued at hundreds or thousands of dollars. Its value is normally much more modest, depending on the exact grade, color, eye appeal, and current collector demand. However, exceptional examples can become much more valuable. High-grade certified specimens, particularly coins with excellent preservation, strong strikes, attractive color, or unusual characteristics, can reach significantly higher prices. In the broader wheat penny market, genuinely scarce varieties, major mint errors, and top-condition examples can sometimes bring hundreds or even thousands of dollars. The key point for viewers is that a large value must be supported by exceptional characteristics, not simply by the fact that the coin is from 1951. Always compare your coin with recent, documented sales rather than relying on unrealistic internet price lists. This is where the search becomes exciting. Could a 1951D wheat penny ever be worth a substantial amount? Under the right circumstances, an exceptional coin can certainly attract strong collector interest, but a normal fine-condition example should not be advertised as automatically worth thousands. Four-figure prices generally require something special, such as an extraordinary grade, a significant recognized error or variety, exceptional preservation, or another unusual characteristic that collectors are willing to pay a premium for. If someone offers a very high price for your coin, verify the claim carefully. Look for auction records, professional grading information, and comparisons with genuinely similar coins. Remember that an asking price on a website is not the same thing as a completed sale. The real market is determined by what knowledgeable buyers have actually paid for comparable coins. If you believe your 1951D is unusually sharp, attractive, or potentially valuable, professional grading may be worth considering. Third-party grading services examine the coin, assign a numerical grade, and encapsulate it in a protective holder. Certification can make it easier for buyers and sellers to understand exactly what they are looking at. However, Grading is not automatically worthwhile for every circulated wheat penny. If the coin is a normal fine example with significant wear and no unusual features, the cost of professional certification may exceed the potential benefit. Before submitting a coin, compare it with recent certified examples and consider whether its condition or rarity makes certification sensible. A professional opinion becomes particularly useful when the coin appears to be in unusually high condition or when you suspect an authentic mint error. If you have old wheat pennies stored in a jar, box, envelope, or inherited collection, the 1951D is certainly worth identifying and preserving. Start by separating coins by date and mint mark. Use a soft surface and good lighting so that you do not accidentally scratch the coins while examining them. Check the area beneath the date for the D-mint mark, then inspect the coin's surfaces and design details. Do not clean the coins simply because they look dark or dirty. If you discover a coin that appears unusually sharp or shows a possible mint-made error, take clear photographs and compare it with reputable references or consult a knowledgeable numismatist. Remember that most wheat pennies are not rare treasures, but the hobby becomes exciting because you never know what may turn up in an old collection. Even when a 1951D wheat penny is not worth a fortune, it remains an important piece of American history. Think about the journey this tiny copper coin may have taken. It was produced during the early 1950s, when the United States was entering a new period of economic growth and technological change. It may have passed through grocery stores, gas stations, banks, vending machines, or countless people's pockets. Every mark on a circulated coin represents part of that journey. For collectors, the value of a coin is therefore not always measured in dollars. A well-preserved 1951D can represent the final years of the wheat cent series and the continuation of Victor David Brenner's famous Lincoln design. That historical connection is one reason these coins remain popular among beginning collectors and experienced numismatists alike. So before you spend or sell a 1951D Lincoln Wheat Penny, take a moment to examine it carefully. Confirm the date, confirm the D-mint mark, evaluate the condition, inspect the surfaces, and look for legitimate errors or varieties. A normal fine condition example should generally be viewed as a collectible old wheat cent rather than automatically assuming it is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. At the same time, exceptionally preserved examples or genuinely rare mint errors can command much stronger prices, sometimes reaching hundreds or potentially thousands, depending on the specific characteristics and verified market demand. The most important lesson is to identify first, grade carefully, and value realistically next up. The 1952 Lincoln Wheat Penny with no mint mark. At first glance, this 1-cent coin may look like an ordinary old penny, especially if it has been sitting in a collection, an old jar, or a box of inherited coins for decades. But the 1952 wheat cent is an important part of the Lincoln cent series, and certain examples can attract much more attention from collectors because of their condition, striking quality, color, and unusual varieties. In this video, we will explore the history and background of the 1952 penny, explain why some examples have no mint mark, examine its unique characteristics, discuss condition and grading, and look at what collectors may pay for better quality examples in today's market. Remember, not every 1952 penny is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, but exceptional specimens and recognized varieties can be significantly more valuable than ordinary circulated coins. The Lincoln Wheat Cent has a remarkable place in United States coinage history. First introduced in 1909, the Lincoln Cent was created to honor President Abraham Lincoln and became the first regular U.S. coin to feature a real historical American president. The famous portrait of Lincoln on the obverse was designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner. On the reverse, the coin displayed 2 wheat ears surrounding the words 1 cent and United States of America, along with the motto EPLUOBUSUNUM. This wheat design remained on the cent for decades and became one of the most recognizable designs in American numismatics. By the time the 1952 cent was produced, the wheat penny had already been circulating for more than 40 years. Millions of Americans used these coins every day for purchases, savings, and ordinary transactions, meaning many examples became worn, scratched, stained, or damaged over the years. The year 1952 falls near the end of the Lincoln Wheat Cent era. Although the design continued until 1958, the series was approaching its final years before the Lincoln Memorial Reverse was introduced in 1959. This makes 1952 interesting to collectors who enjoy assembling complete wheat cent date sets. The Philadelphia Mint produced 1952 Lincoln Wheat Cents without a mint mark, while Denver and San Francisco examples can be identified by their respective mint marks. Therefore, when you find a 1952 penny with no mint mark, that does not automatically mean the coin is an error or a rare mistake. In fact, the absence of a mint mark is normal for a coin struck at Philadelphia during this period. However, collectors still carefully examine these coins because individual examples can vary dramatically in quality, preservation, strike, color, and possible die characteristics. One of the biggest points to understand about this coin is the phrase, "no mint mark." New collectors sometimes assume that every old coin without a letter must be extremely rare. That is not the case with the 1952 Lincoln Wheat cent. A normal Philadelphia minted 1952 cent does not carry a mint letter beneath the date. By comparison, a 1952D was produced at the Denver Mint and carries a D, while a 1952S was produced at San Francisco and carries an S. So if your 1952 wheat penny has no letter beneath the date, it can be a genuine Philadelphia issue rather than an error. The important question then becomes, how well preserved is it, and does it have any recognized variety or unusual characteristic? This distinction is extremely important when determining value. The 1952 no mint mark wheat cent has several characteristics that make it appealing to collectors. The obverse features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing right, with liberty and the date 1952 surrounding the portrait. The reverse shows the two wheat ears that give the series its famous nickname, Wheat Penny. Collectors often inspect the details around Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, and coat, while the reverse is examined for sharp wheat lines, lettering, and overall strike quality. A coin with strong original detail can be considerably more desirable than one that has been heavily circulated. Collectors also look closely at the surface for scratches, corrosion, stains, cleaning, or other damage. Even small differences in preservation can have a major effect on a coin's market value. Condition is one of the most important factors when evaluating a 1952 wheat penny. A heavily circulated example may show significant wear on Lincoln's portrait and the wheat ears on the reverse. A coin in fine condition generally retains more design detail, while a very fine or extremely fine example can show substantially sharper features. The most desirable coins are those that have survived in about uncirculated or mint state condition with minimal evidence of circulation. At the highest grades, collectors begin paying close attention to luster, strike quality, marks, surface preservation, and color. This is why two 1952 pennies with exactly the same date and no mint mark can have completely different values. One might be a common circulated coin worth a modest amount, while a beautifully preserved certified specimen could bring considerably more. Another important factor for copper Lincoln cents is color designation. Collectors and grading services commonly distinguish between brown, and red examples. A brown coin generally has darker or more aged copper coloration, while a red-brown coin retains a mixture of original red and brown tones. A red example has preserved a much larger amount of its original reddish-orange copper color. In high grades, original red color can make a major difference in collector demand. However, collectors should be cautious because artificially cleaned, polished, or chemically altered coins are not the same as naturally preserved red cents. A coin that has been cleaned may lose collector appeal even if it looks shiny. For a valuable 1952 penny, originality and natural surfaces are extremely important. If you are searching through a group of 1952 wheat pennies, don't stop after checking the date and mint mark. Experienced collectors also examine coins for possible errors and varieties. These can include unusual doubling, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, die chips, broad strikes, and other mint-related abnormalities. However, not every apparent doubling or unusual mark is a valuable mint error. Damage that happens after the coin leaves the mint can sometimes look similar to a genuine error. This is why authentication is important when you believe you have discovered something unusual. A genuine and significant mint error can make an otherwise ordinary wheat cent much more interesting, but its value depends on the exact error, visibility, rarity, and collector demand. When evaluating your 1952 no mint mark penny, take a close look at the surfaces. Avoid assuming that a shiny coin is automatically valuable. Original copper coins can develop attractive natural color over time, while cleaning can leave unnatural brightness, hairline scratches, or altered surfaces. Collectors generally prefer coins with original, undisturbed surfaces. Check the fields around Lincoln's portrait, the area between the letters, and the reverse around the wheat ears. Look for scratches, dents, corrosion, spots, and discoloration. A coin with attractive surfaces and strong details can be far more desirable than an example that has been aggressively cleaned. If you believe your coin may be valuable, it is usually better to preserve it as found rather than attempting to improve its appearance yourself. Now let's talk about value. The current 2026 market value of a 1952 Lincoln Wheat cent with no mint mark depends heavily on condition, color, variety, certification, and actual market demand. Ordinary circulated examples generally do not bring hundreds or thousands of dollars simply because they are from 1952. Many worn examples have only a modest collector premium. Better preserved coins can be worth more, particularly when they retain attractive original surfaces and strong details. High-grade certified examples can move into substantially higher price ranges, and exceptional coins may reach hundreds of dollars or more. In the very highest grades, particularly when combined with desirable color and strong eye appeal, values can become much more significant. Therefore, never judge the value of your coin based only on a headline claiming that every 1952 penny is worth thousands. So how can a 1-cent coin potentially reach hundreds or even thousands of dollars? The answer is usually a combination of rarity and quality. A common date becomes much more interesting when an example survives in an unusually high grade. Add attractive original red color, excellent strike quality, minimal marks and professional certification, and collector demand can increase dramatically. A confirmed rare variety or major mint error can add another layer of interest. The important thing is that high prices generally apply to specific exceptional coins rather than the entire mintage. This is why serious collectors study auction records, grading populations, certified examples, and recognized varieties before assigning a high value to a coin. If you think your 1952 no-mint mark wheat cent might be an unusually high-grade coin, professional grading can be worth considering. Professional grading services examine the coin, assign a numerical grade, and place it in a protective holder with identification information. Certification can make it easier for buyers and collectors to understand exactly what they are purchasing. However, grading is not automatically necessary for every old penny. If your coin is heavily worn, damaged, corroded, or common, the cost of professional certification may exceed its potential value. The best candidates for grading are usually coins that appear exceptionally well preserved, have strong original color, or display a potentially important variety or mint error. Before spending money on professional services, you can perform a careful examination at home. Start by looking at the date and confirming that it reads 1952. Then check beneath the date and confirm that there is no mint mark. Examine both sides under good lighting and use a magnifying glass if necessary. Look for strong details, original-looking surfaces, unusual doubling, cracks, missing design elements, or an unusual strike. Pay special attention to the wheat ears on the reverse and Lincoln's portrait on the obverse. Do not clean or polish the coin during your examination. Even if the penny looks dirty or dull, its natural surface may be important to its collector value. If something looks unusual, compare it with reliable reference photographs or seek an experienced numismatist's opinion. One of the most important lessons from the 1952 wheat cent is that age alone does not determine value. A coin can be more than 70 years old and still be relatively common. What matters is the combination of date, mint, condition, color, variety, errors, originality, and demand. A circulated 1952 Philadelphia cent should not automatically be described as a $1,000 coin. On the other hand, an exceptionally preserved example with a high certified grade or a legitimate rare characteristic can be much more valuable than its 1-cent face value. This is why coin collecting is so interesting. Two coins that appear almost identical to the casual observer can have very different values to experienced collectors. So before you spend or overlook a 1952 Lincoln Wheat Penny with no mint mark, take a moment to examine it carefully. Remember that the missing mint mark is normal for Philadelphia-produced cents, so the real treasure hunt involves condition, originality, color, strike quality, and possible varieties or errors. Most examples will not be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, but exceptional coins can command much stronger prices than ordinary circulated pieces. If your 1952 wheat cent is in genuinely nice condition, has attractive original color, sharp details, or an unusual mint-made characteristic, it may deserve a closer look from a knowledgeable collector or professional. Keep your coins safe, never clean valuable old copper, and always research actual sales rather than relying on exaggerated asking prices. Next up, the 1955 Lincoln Wheat Cent, a 1-cent coin struck at the Denver Mint. If you happen to have a 1955 penny with a small D mint mark beneath the date on the obverse, Do not throw it away or assume it is automatically just an ordinary old penny. The 1955D Lincoln Wheat Cent has several characteristics that make it interesting to collectors, including its age, classic wheat reverse design, copper composition, Denver mint origin, condition, color, and the possibility of collectible die varieties. However, one important point should be made right from the beginning. Not every 1955D penny is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. Most examples that have spent decades circulating are worth relatively modest amounts, while truly exceptional coins in high grades can be much more valuable. So in today's video, we are going to explore the history, design, condition, unique features, varieties, and potential market value of this fascinating 1955D wheat penny. The story of the 1955D Lincoln Cent begins with the famous Lincoln Cent design created by sculptor Victor David Brenner. The Lincoln Cent had been introduced decades earlier in 1909, becoming one of the most recognizable coins in American history. By 1955, the Lincoln Wheat Cent had already been produced for almost half a century, and millions of Americans had encountered these small copper coins in everyday commerce. The obverse features the familiar portrait of President Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the inscriptions Liberty and In God We Trust, along with the date 1955. On a Denver-produced example, the small letter D appears beneath the date, identifying the Denver Mint. The reverse carries the famous two wheat ears surrounding the words 1 cent and United States of America, along with the motto EPLUOBUSUNUM. This wheat reverse is one of the main reasons these coins remain popular with collectors today, because it immediately identifies the coin as part of the historic 1909-1958 Lincoln Wheat Cent series. In 1955, the Denver Mint produced a very large quantity of Lincoln Wheat Cents. According to PCGS Coin Facts, the 1955D issue had a reported mintage of 563,257,500 pieces. That number is important because it tells us that the 1955D was not originally an extremely low mintage coin. In fact, more than 500 million were struck. Because of this, simply finding a 1955D date and a D mint mark does not automatically make the coin rare. But mintage is only one part of the story. What happens to coins after they leave the mint can be just as important. Hundreds of millions of coins may have been produced, but decades of circulation, environmental exposure, cleaning, damage, corrosion, and loss can dramatically reduce the number of attractive surviving examples. For collectors, this is where condition becomes extremely important. A worn 1955D and a spectacular, nearly flawless 1955D can have dramatically different levels of desirability and value. Now let's talk about the condition mentioned in today's video, a dusty 1955D wheat penny. If your coin is covered with dust, dirt, or surface grime, its appearance may not immediately look impressive. You might see brown coloration, dark areas, scratches, small spots, or a dull surface, but collectors should be careful about trying to improve the coin themselves. Cleaning an old copper coin can permanently damage its original surface and may reduce its collector appeal. A dusty coin is not necessarily a worthless coin, but there is a major difference between harmless surface dust and actual corrosion, environmental damage, or cleaning. If you believe your coin could be valuable, it is generally better to avoid polishing, rubbing, scraping, or using household chemicals. The original surface is part of the coin's history. Professional grading services evaluate factors such as wear, surface quality, color, marks, and overall preservation, and an improperly cleaned coin can receive a details designation rather than a normal numerical grade. One of the most important features to check is the mint mark. Look directly below the 1955 date on the obverse. If you see a small D, your coin was struck at the Denver Mint. If there is no mint mark, it was produced at Philadelphia, while an S would indicate San Francisco for issues where that mint produced the coin. The mint mark can make a major difference when identifying a coin, although it does not automatically determine its value. On the 1955D, the D mint mark confirms the Denver origin and places the coin into a specific branchment issue within the Wheat Cent series. Collectors also examine the mint mark carefully because the 1955D has documented varieties involving the mint mark, including repunched mint mark varieties. PCGS lists a 1955D/D horizontal D variety among the recognized die varieties associated with the issue. Another fascinating area is the possibility of die varieties and double details. The 1955D issue is known with listed varieties including doubled die obverse examples and repunched mint marks. When examining a possible variety, collectors do not simply look for random scratches or damage. A true die variety results from something that happened during the preparation or use of the dies, and the same unusual feature can appear consistently on coins struck from that die. This is why variety attribution requires careful study. A normal 1955D penny with damage might look unusual to the naked eye but have little additional value, while a properly identified and authenticated variety can attract serious collector interest. If you think your coin has unusual doubling around the date, Liberty, in God We Trust, or other design elements, compare it carefully with trusted variety references before assuming it is a valuable error. The color of the copper is another important factor. Collectors commonly encounter three broad color designations on copper Lincoln cents: brown, and red. A coin that has spent decades exposed to air and the environment often develops a brown appearance as the original copper surface changes. A red-brown coin retains some of its original reddish coloration, while a red example has preserved much more of the original mint-red appearance. On a 1955D, color can make a significant difference at the highest grades. A bright, original-looking red coin with strong surfaces can be much more desirable than an ordinary brown example with heavy marks. PCGS separately catalogs brown, and red versions of the 1955D. This is especially important for collectors who are searching through old rolls, collections, inherited coin jars, or boxes of wheat pennies looking for unusually well-preserved pieces. The physical specifications of the 1955D Lincoln Wheat cent also help identify it. PCGS lists the coin at approximately 19 millimeters in diameter, weighing 3.11 grams with a plain edge. It was made from the traditional bronze composition of approximately 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc used for Lincoln cents of this era. If you have a suspected 1955D, these basic specifications can be useful for authentication. However, weight and measurements alone do not prove a coin is genuine because counterfeiters can sometimes reproduce the general dimensions. A valuable coin should always be evaluated using multiple characteristics, including design details, surfaces, weight, diameter, color, and overall appearance. For ordinary collecting, a basic examination under good lighting and magnification can reveal a lot, but rare varieties and expensive coins should be professionally authenticated. Now let's discuss the current market value, because this is probably the question most viewers are waiting for. The value of a 1955D Lincoln Wheat cent depends heavily on condition and variety. A dusty, circulated example with significant wear may have a relatively modest collector value, especially if it has no special variety and has damaged surfaces. A nicer circulated coin can be worth more, while uncirculated examples can move into higher price levels. Certified high-grade coins are where the numbers can become much more interesting. For example, PCGS reports an auction record of $8,400 for a 1955D Lincoln cent graded MS67 plus red, sold by Heritage Auctions on August 18, 2024. This is an important distinction. The thousands of dollars result belongs to an extraordinarily high-grade certified example, not to every dusty 1955D penny found in circulation. For viewers hoping their dusty 1955D is worth thousands, the key lesson is to understand the difference between face value, ordinary collector value, and exceptional auction value. Internet videos sometimes show enormous prices and make it sound as though every old penny is a hidden fortune. That is not how the coin market works. A normal circulated 1955D is generally not automatically worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. The big money examples are usually connected to exceptional preservation, high certification grades, strong original color, rare varieties, or unusual characteristics that collectors specifically seek. PCGS describes the 1955D as difficult to find in very high grades, noting that MS66 and higher examples can be challenging because many coins have corrosion spots, nicks, and scratches. Therefore, if you have a dusty coin, do not judge it only by its surface appearance. Instead, examine whether the underlying surfaces are actually preserved or whether the coin has suffered permanent environmental damage. One of the most interesting aspects of this issue is how dramatically value can change as condition improves. A circulated coin might show significant wear on Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, and the wheat ears on the reverse. In an uncirculated coin, the original design details remain much sharper, and collectors begin paying close attention to contact marks and surface preservation. At very high grades, even small imperfections can prevent a coin from reaching the next grading level. This explains why a coin that looks almost perfect to an inexperienced collector may still grade lower than expected. PCGS records illustrate this separation clearly. The 1955D MS65 red issue has appeared in auction records at much more modest levels than the spectacular MS67 Plus red record. The lesson is simple: grade matters enormously, especially when discussing the possibility of hundreds or thousands of dollars. The 1955D double die and repunch mint mark varieties deserve special attention from anyone searching through old wheat pennies. PCGS catalogs multiple 1955D varieties, including doubled die obverse examples in brown, and red, as well as repunched mint mark varieties. But collectors should be cautious because not every apparent doubling is a genuine doubled die. Mechanical damage, die deterioration, scratches and post-mint contact can create misleading shapes that resemble doubling. A true variety should match established diagnostic characteristics. This is why magnification and reliable references are essential. If you believe you have a genuine variety, document the coin clearly and consider professional attribution or grading before making claims about a high value. Another important feature is the wheat reverse itself. The two wheat stalks on the back symbolize an agricultural theme that was central to the design of the original Lincoln cent. These wheat ears remained on Lincoln cents until 1958, making the 1955D part of the final years of the classic wheat reverse series. In 1959, the reverse design changed to the Lincoln Memorial, ending the wheat reverse era. This gives the 1955D an important place in American coin history because it was struck only a few years before that major design transition. For collectors, holding a 1955D is therefore more than holding an old 1-cent coin. It is holding an artifact from the closing years of one of America's most famous coin designs. If you find a 1955D penny today, the first thing you should do is identify it carefully rather than immediately assigning a dollar value. Confirm the date, look for the D-mint mark, inspect both sides under good lighting and check the overall condition. Look at Lincoln's portrait, the lettering, the date, the mint mark and the wheat stalks. Then examine the coin for unusual doubling, repunched mint mark characteristics, strong original color, major errors or exceptional preservation. Avoid cleaning it. If the coin appears ordinary and heavily circulated, it may simply be a collectible wheat cent with modest value. But if it appears unusually sharp, bright, original, or has a recognized variety, professional evaluation may be worthwhile. Remember that an accurate identification is much more important than an exciting price estimate. So, what makes the 1955D Lincoln Wheat Cent special? It is the combination of history, age, Denver production, classic wheat reverse design, copper composition, documented varieties, and the challenge of finding exceptionally well-preserved examples. The enormous original mintage means the date itself is not an extreme rarity, but high-quality survivors can be much harder to find. PCGS auction data shows just how far the market can extend for exceptional examples, with the 1955D reaching $8,400 at MS67 plus red. At the same time, a dusty circulated coin should not automatically be advertised as a $1,000 treasure. The responsible way to discuss value is to explain that condition, color, variety, authenticity and market demand all matter. Finally, if you have a 1955D wheat penny sitting in an old jar, coin box, drawer or family collection, take another look before you dismiss it. You may not have a fortune, but you could have an interesting piece of American history. And if the coin happens to be an exceptional high-grade specimen or a recognized variety, its collector value could be considerably higher than 1 cent. The most important thing is to inspect the coin carefully, protect its original surfaces, and avoid cleaning or damaging it in an attempt to make it look newer. The 1955D Lincoln Wheat Cent was produced in the hundreds of millions, but the finest surviving examples tell a very different story from ordinary circulated pieces. So check that date, look for the D-mint mark, study the condition, examine the varieties, and remember that the most valuable coin is not necessarily the oldest-looking or dirtiest one. It is often the one with the right combination of rarity, authenticity, condition, and collector demand. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the 1955D Lincoln Wheat Cent, make sure to stay tuned for more videos exploring old US coins, unusual varieties, and the fascinating stories hidden inside America's pocket change. Thanks for watching.